Keir Starmer faces growing rebellion over benefit cuts. Amid stark warnings, Keir Starmer is facing an escalating backlash from Labour MPs over controversial plans to cut sickness and disability benefits, with critics warning that the reforms could push some of the most vulnerable people into financial hardship. 99% of viewers are not subscribed. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It really helps the channel. Thank you. Veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott directly challenged the Prime Minister, arguing there was nothing moral about reducing payments for up to 1 million people. During PMQs, she accused the government of attempting to balance the country's books on the backs of the most vulnerable and poor in our society. Labour MP for Blackpool, Webb, warned that proposed cuts to personal independence payments, a PIP, would have a devastating impact on his constituents. "I will never vote for anything that makes people in Blackpool poorer, and some of these reforms could do exactly that," he stated. Instead, he urged the government to consider raising billions through a 2% wealth tax on assets exceeding £10 million. "This is the kind of reform we need, one that protects the vulnerable instead of punishing them," he added. His concerns were echoed by Labour MP Neil Duncan Jordan, who took to social media to warn that tightening PIP eligibility criteria would plunge more disabled people into poverty. He stressed that benefits are already far from generous and urged the government to ensure that those with the broadest shoulders pay their share. Left-wing Labour MP Richard Burgon also issued a stark warning, declaring that Starmer could face the mother of all rebellions if he proceeded with the cruel £5 billion welfare cuts. On Wednesday, Department for Work and Pensions, Minister Torsten Bell confirmed that legislation would be required to implement the proposed PIP reforms. Reports suggest that Starmer could be facing the most significant rebellion of his premiership, with as many as 40 Labour MPs potentially defying the government when the bill reaches Parliament. Defending the proposals, Starmer insisted in the Commons that reforming the system was a moral issue, pointing out that 1 in 8 young people are not in employment, education, or training. "I've lived with the impact of disability in our family through my mother and brother all my life. I do understand the human impact of this," he said, "but the current system is morally and economically indefensible, and we are right to reform it." However, grim new research published on Wednesday warned that millions of low-income households could face a major income shock due to the planned changes. The Resolution Foundation estimated that, on average, households with at least one disabled person could lose £400 per year by 2029 to 30. However, they cautioned that some individuals could face significantly greater losses, with the most severely affected losing up to £9,600 annually by the end of the decade. The report highlighted that PIP claimants with musculoskeletal conditions, which affect bones, joints, and muscles, would be most impacted by the reforms, while those with learning disabilities, autism, and cerebral palsy were least likely to be affected. While the Resolution Foundation acknowledged that the government's proposals represented a serious attempt to control the rising cost of health and disability benefits, they warned that any gains risk being completely overshadowed by the scale of income losses faced by those who will receive reduced or no support at all, irrespective of whether they are able to work. The report also suggested that many of the proposals in the government's Green Paper appear to be driven by short-term cost-cutting measures rather than genuine long-term reform. It cautioned that without concrete commitments to transitional protections, millions of low-income households could suffer severe financial hardship.